It's time. It's time to scale. But how do you scale internationally? And how do you scale through corporate partnerships? I'm Kimberly Larsen. I'm the founder and CEO of Timetoriot and Timetoriot. And together with Suprasteria and Danske Bank with guests, we will be exploring these topics live in this 3-part podcast series from the epicenter. Join us and see if you are ready. Are you thinking about bringing your business idea out to the world? Because for many startups and scale-ups, that's one of the main targets. But getting there, on the other hand, that is not the easiest procedure. For Danske Bank, this is an extremely important topic, and they've actually initiated this talk together with Mia Grosen from Canute and Fredrik from Nyby and Skyfall Ventures. And Johanna Herbst, you are Danske Bank's growth and impact lead here in Norway, and you're the one who invited us here today. Why is this so important to Danske Bank?
Yeah, as you said, we work with the growth and impact in Danske Bank, and we are a Nordic team, really passionate about innovation and growth in our region. And we see that our markets are pretty small, but we have a lot of small but fast-growing companies that we are really impressed by, and we really, really want to see them fly.
But isn't it good enough to be, a good-sized company in your own country? Do we really have to go international?
Yeah, I think we see a big difference from if we look 10 years back, that many companies are based on tech, and it seems almost like it's in their DNA to go abroad. And also the tech is usually nationality agnostic, right? So there are so many opportunities, and to stay competitive and to grow enough and to fly, that's important.
That makes sense. And then you've invited our experts here today.
I have.
Do you want to say why?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we as a bank can support in so many ways. We have our digital platforms, the Hub and Plus Impact. We run accelerators and we advise growth companies. But we are so happy to see that there are so many talented people out there with a great passion to help out. And so we have 2 of them here today. We have Fredrik, as you said, from Nyby, who's been through this journey himself a couple of times and can share his experience. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
And then we have Mia, running Canute internationalization programs. And Danske Bank was really impressed with the work Mia is doing. So we have for some time been partners with Canute to make sure that we can have even more Nordic companies join the program and benefit from the expertise there. So thank you also to you, Mia, for joining us here today.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, so Mia, basically you're running then an accelerator on how to scale internationally, right? Can you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Of course, yeah. So we actually call it a networking program. So Canute is a platform for Nordic companies that wants to scale internationally. And we mainly help them doing that by having these 3-day market entry programs in Stockholm, Berlin, London, and New York. And here we collect 10 startups at a time who are ready to scale to those markets. And then we bring them to the market and we connect them with local network, mostly important. And then we try to just fast speed the knowledge sharing as well in the market. So that what would normally take them 10 months to build themselves in the market, we try to do that in 3 days. So basically saving them time in scaling to these new markets.
Time saved is money spent, but is it for everyone? Like, can you do this for any company? So any startup can come to you and say, I want to scale international, or like, how do you pick who should actually do this?
Yeah, so we have 3 main criteria that we look at. One is that you need to have recurring revenue in your own market. So this is because we believe that you need to have found some kind of product market fit or some kind of proven business model in your home market before you're ready to scale internationally. So we have that as a criteria, recurring revenue. Then we need to see growing traction as well. And that's also because some businesses might base their business model on market shares rather than revenue. So we can also accept if you have like really fast growing traction as a business. And then the last one is might be the most important one, is a market criteria. So if you want to come to the London program, you need to have landed your first paying customer, your first partnership, or your first investor in the UK within the last 12 months, or have a go-to-market strategy to do so within the next 12 months. So it's like a two-year time gap, you can say. And we've seen that adds a lot of value to the group going together, because it means that you're going together with 9 other companies who are also serious about entering into this new foreign market, where there's other, good initiatives out there where we don't see this market criteria, and then you end up with a group where there's some really early stage companies and some making like millions in revenue already, and they might not have that much in common. But because we have this market criteria, we end up with a group of 10 companies who are really serious about scaling to the specific market. And it does make it a lot easier for us as well to make the content in the program very hands-on, because they're all about to scale, tomorrow. So it makes it easier to make a very valuable program for them.
Well, Fredrik, you've been down this route before. Did you fit these criteria that she mentions? And, is it always good to go global, or do you think that's sort of a myth?
I think it of course depends, which is the boring reply to anything. But I think we have done some really tough learnings, especially with the first startup I was involved in, something called Evacuate, where we made security devices for fire brigades and so on. And we actually sold all over the world. We were really keen on calling ourselves Born Global. So we sold all over the world, and we sold to Japan and India before Sweden and so on, which was fantastic cool for us at that time. But we also learned that we had lots of learning from the teething problems of the product from fire brigades in Japan, which we could have learned from fire brigades in Oslo, which would have been way smarter. So I think it depends on what kind of product it is, but it's important that it is mature enough. Because this going internationally is about scaling, right? That's the reason for doing it. And then you shouldn't scale too early in general, being international or just scale in your own country. You should scale when you're ready to scale.
But some companies might be born global, though.
Yeah.
Not because they need to scale.
Yeah. And some dynamics is exactly like that too. That it really doesn't matter where in the world you are. If it's certain tech products and so on, it can be, if you don't need critical mass and parameters like that, then you can. But you have to really understand the dynamic of what you're doing and what markets you target. And focus is always a smart thing.
Focus tends to help sometimes. I've heard that myself. But so you're the founder and CEO of Nyby. Huge focus on resource collaboration in the public sector. Can you tell us a little bit more about what it is you do and how you came about this?
Yeah, we're a team of 15 in Nyby, and what we do is that we have, together with a number of local authorities in Norway, we have created world's first resource collaboration platform for public services, which is because all municipalities and agencies related to health, they basically struggle with lack of resources. But if you look broader in the municipalities, lots of available resource and idle and underutilized resources too at unemployment office and so on. So what we do with Nyby, we enable municipalities that nurses, typically, which is the core target, nurses have way too much to do. And then through our service, they can connect directly with pre-qualified resources for different tasks that they can carry out, so that in that way the nurses get superpowers, and you can involve unemployed volunteers, citizens, and so on in the service production.
I think this is super interesting, especially because, we're discussing scaling and scaling internationally, and that is very dependent on these types of collaborations in the way that you talk about the resource collaborations. We're collaborating in different time zones and different cultures. And with one of my companies, Timetoriot, which is a marketplace for the creative industry, we were super surprised to see the big cultural differences trying to collaborate in the UK. And I thought, it would be quite similar in UK to Norway, but it was huge differences in how our customers are. And Mia, well, you pretty much are born global because you started your whole career backpacking in the world and living in Thailand, didn't you?
Yeah. It's quite a few years ago, but yeah.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that was actually my first own startup. That was within travel tech, and yeah, I came up with the idea actually while living in Istanbul, working in a hostel, and then we developed a social management tool for hostels and backpackers. And yeah, then I moved to Thailand and spread it out there. So it's actually adding to Fredrik's point before as well, that yes, we were born global in that first startup, but after, I think it was the first 6 months, we had clients in Istanbul, in Bangkok, one in Canada, one in Hungary of all places. And I think we spread ourselves way too thin. We were still only 4 people managing this company. And I think that's a point as well to make, that sometimes startups are way too opportunity driven, because you just launched your product, and then anyone who has an interest in buying your product, you think is like sent from heaven. So you
love your
that
customers.
Opportunity. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And then you end up with like one random customer in Hungary and one in Canada and one in Istanbul. And at least that's what we found in that first startup, that it was very tempting taking these clients in because we were paying for the software as well. But we ended up having to manage across different time zones, and the product wasn't like fully developed yet. And yeah, so I just think that's a point as well, to also have the courage to say no to some paying clients in the beginning, to simply choose to focus in 2 or 3 markets at a time.
Yeah, exactly. Fredrik, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, I think it's super interesting because it's very typical for a startup to be opportunity driven or sales driven instead of market driven. Because a market, if you focus on the market, then you will have a market can be defined if the customers talk to each other and know each other, and then you get the word of mouth effects, which is fantastic, and reference effects and so on. And that's a reason for itself to focus on the market instead of just product and a sales opportunity.
Yeah, because it's easy to think. Yeah, go for it, Mia.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to add as well that one thing is like, and I think that's the most common one, to be opportunity driven by the sales, because that's what you want in a new startup. But I've also seen examples of startups, I'm asking them, why are you in Denmark and Spain of all countries? And it's like, oh yeah, once we had like a Spanish intern and she knew the language, so then it just made sense to launch in Spain. And which, it might not have been a bad choice, but the fact that a lot of these market choices are not data driven, they're just opportunity driven. And that being like, oh, my girlfriend lived in Canada, so I chose to open up a sub department in Canada, or I had a Spanish intern, or I had a client that was willing to pay from Hungary. I just see that so much.
But is that always a bad thing? Because here we come into the question about the structure or random, right? So, for instance, we're a marketplace connecting people who want jobs with jobs. And we've had some random jobs suddenly in Canada where we're like, okay, let's see what happens. And then it's growth. And then, we put on people. So we've always had a plan of being structured, but random is what's given us the biggest growth. What do you think, Fredrik? Should it be random or should it be structured, or is there one or the other?
I think it's super interesting. This, of course, it has pitfalls on both sides. I've coached a company that had massive or lots of demand from the US on some very simple products, but then they had in their plan that US was not until 3 years. So first they should do Sweden, then Denmark, then maybe UK, and so on. And then structure is a good thing, but I think they missed lots of opportunities, and the US market might have been far more ripe for their product than Sweden, for instance. But it has its advantages too. Like for instance with Nyby, we have to do a more structured approach because we sell to government. So we really should investigate, is the government, do they have the same understanding of the challenge? What are the challenges? What's the structure there, and so on, before we go in, because it's also long sales cycles, about 9 to 12 month sales cycles. So we need to kind of go in and work with the market to penetrate it. But are
you saying the government is not impulsive?
Sorry?
Are you saying the government is not impulsive?
No, it's not. During COVID, government were very
exactly
impulsive, so that was fantastic. Yeah.
But you are also an investor, so you're sort of on both sides, because in Nyby you're the founder and CEO, and then in Skyfall Ventures you're actually a VC investor. What do you prefer as an investor?
No, but it's always good to have a plan. You should have a plan, but then it's like military as well. You should planning is very important, but the plan is nothing. So you should have a plan, and which is the idea, and then stuff comes up, and then you should be able to act on it, right?
Yeah. So these are all things we need to think about when we want to go international. But how can the Danske Bank help us? It's pretty massive cultural differences. Like, does it help with the local presence, or how is the Danske Bank's?
For sure. I mean, we see a big benefit of being a bank that can actually scale with our customers. I mean, not to Kyrgyzstan, but to quite a few other markets, and to actually have offices and have people on the ground. And places only not further away than London or Berlin, but still people on the ground who knows we can also talk about regulation, not a very fun word, but very important. And knowing the market, having connections, and that can really be a big benefit for our smaller customers, getting help with that. So,
and just to validate, because a big brand. That you collaborate with a well-known local or a brand, international brand, or a well-known local brand. Like in Sweden, we sell through Atea, which is a well-known brand in Sweden. It gives lots of good credibility for us.
For sure.
And maybe I can just add to that as well, that speaking of a country like Kyrgyzstan, or me that lived in Turkey or in Thailand, like you kind of expect to meet some cultural differences. But I actually had exactly the same experience as you, Kim, when moving to London, and I was UK country manager for a Danish startup over there, and I just didn't expect to meet that many cultural differences. So the day after I moved there, I just went out on the street and started knocking on doors. I just wanted to sell the product, and the way we do that in Denmark is that the polite approach is that you don't want to waste people's time, so you go very much straight to the point. Like, you don't want to waste 15 of their minutes talking about something that's not relevant. So you just go straight to the point and you sell the product, and you're like, this is the price, this is the value proposition. Do you want to buy it? And that's a polite business way to do it in Denmark. And all the Brits thought I was so rude.
Rude.
So it was just like, if someone could have prepared me that, and I even have a British partner, right? And I still wasn't prepared. So you really, really need to prepare these things so you don't waste your time, because I think the first 10, 12 sales meetings I had was more or less waste of time, because they thought I was really rude. So I was not going to hear back from them, right? So if I had been a bit better prepared of the culture and how to go about it, I think I would have saved myself time and money. And then, after those first meetings, I kind of got the point, and then I started talking about the underground and the weather, and asking about how their own is. And you waste 15, 20 minutes talking about things that are not relevant, but that's how you do it over there. Yeah. And you also have to dress up a little bit more. It sounds like a small thing, but if you come in like what we normally wear in Denmark, I think they see you as unprofessional. You do have to dress up a bit more to come across as a professional person. So there's just these small things that I would say, especially regarding sales, that you really need to put your head around before you take the big step and start selling in another market.
So Mia, if we go to your accelerator, these are the kind of stuff that you will help us with, right? And then how many people have actually, or how many companies have gone through your program to date?
Yeah, so we're in 65 now, and we'll reach 85 at the end of this year. And that's across the 4 different markets. And actually adding to the point Johanna made as well from Danske Bank, I think that's a big reason for why this cooperation works so well between Canute and Danske Bank, because hear this the right way, but when a bank advisor then have a product on the shelf, which is a mini accelerator program, a networking program in another market, that's something unexpected. Like the Danish clients that come to Danske Bank, they don't expect that they can offer a lot more than the normal bank services. So when they then send them on a Canute program, and they actually get this huge value in terms of go-to-market and understanding the cultural differences and meeting investors, I think that's a really, really positive way for a bank to surprise as well, if that makes sense.
Is that your experience as well, Johanna, that
Yep.
this is your surprising side?
Yeah, well, for sure. I mean, banks are boring per definition, or perceived as boring. But,
None of us said that.
But
None
I
of us
mean,
said
when
that.
we say that we have, a genuine passion for growth and innovation, we actually do. So for sure, we advise our customers through our growth setup that we have in what we hope is a really good way. But also, we see that there are other people out there who are so, who has got things we don't have and experiences we don't have. So to partner up is a really great way to actually help out even better than we can do on our own. So I mean, as banks, we talk a lot about risks and stuff. That's kind of in our DNA, and that is also important. I mean, we see when you take your company abroad, I mean, of course, there is an increase in risk in what is probably already a quite risky initiative you're running as a startup, per definition. We have our own products and own ways of helping, because when you invest abroad, even if you pay salaries or you buy goods or whatever you do, you will have maybe a different currency. So there will be new issues in liquidity and in currency risk that, I mean, it's not something that all entrepreneurs know about. So that is something that we really feel it's important to educate and to help out in getting good cash management setups, and also in making sure that you actually hedge your currency risk. So when different currencies fluctuate against each other, your return or your liquidity might actually not be as you thought it would be.
But I think this is super interesting, because as running some scale-ups myself, I'm not thinking that, let's tell my bank about this risk we want to endeavor out to. But it's good to know that, you can go to Danske Bank and say, we want to do this, it's risky. And you will say, let us help you minimize the risk.
Exactly, because it's not about always minimizing either. It's actually about optimizing the risk, because without risk, there is no return, right?
Oh, see,
so banks like risk, just making sure the right amount.
How great a tagline is that? Danske Bank, optimizing your risk.
Exactly. We'll use that.
But if I can add to that point as well, actually just tapping into Fredrik's plan as well, about having a plan. I just very much agree with that, and maybe especially when talking to a potential investor or even your bank advisor, it's always good to have a 3 or even a 5-year plan. And I think it can help you steer your team as well, to make sure you're all on the right or the same track at least. But then, of course, keeping it agile. And I think as long as you stay in contact with your potential investor or with your bank advisor, everyone knows that your plan is going to change. But to be able to show that you do have a plan, I think it's just a really good point.
We have some sense of attachment to reality. That helps as well.
Yeah, but it's also very important for investors and banks and team members and customers to see the level of ambition. Because and that's a good thing with a 5 or 10 year target, that you see the level of ambition. Is this a global scale up that you're such a kind of venture, or are you gonna stay in Norway, sell to 50 municipalities or whatever, which is completely different team that you can attract, completely different investors that you can interact, and the same with partners and so on. Yeah, so that I think is building something big. Is that it's like building a house with many walls at the same time, right? So you need to have the ambition, and then when you have an attractive ambition, then you get great team members, and then you get great investors, and also demanding great customers.
So, Mia, do you see any obvious similarities between those companies going through your program who sort of made it?
Well, I just hate to sound boring, because I do really agree that sometimes you hit the big growth opportunities with going for opportunities. But I would say that one similarity is that they have all been very data-driven in their market choice and in their whole go-to-market strategy. So you kind of have, very simply put, two different kind of companies going abroad. You have the ones that we just talked about before, very opportunity-driven. They don't really have a plan, but they know, like for example, the UK is a big market, so they're just going to go over there. They're going to send a founder for half a year and see what happens, which is kind of what I did myself the first time. So there's nothing wrong with that. But and big things can happen. But then you have the other companies, and I've just seen some amazing examples of really complicated Excel sheets where they put in like obviously comparing the market sizes, but also looking at the competitor situation, the willingness to pay for a product like this, the level of digitization in the population in the country, all these like maybe 50 different kind of factors. And then they put 7 countries next to each other and compare these numbers. And that's how they choose what markets to go to. And I've just been so impressed with some of those companies of how they've done it. And I must say that they are the ones that I see succeed as well. So I think that because I'm very focused on the go-to-market part of the company, but I think it's normally a sign that that's how they go about a lot of different subjects in their company. So I just think that data-driven approaches just seem to work in the long run, at least. And when you see it on a statistically level, then I know that we have the odd ones out that just hit that opportunity in the US and they go big. But I would say that's the most common similarity I see among the ones that do succeed.
But also, it sounds like you need to kind of be a certain place with your company before you even need to think about going international. So when are you ready to go? How do you know?
I think it's one kind of top questions above it is maybe I think in many aspects it's important to understand what kind of game are we in. Are we in a hiring game? Are we in a marketing game? Are we in a tech game? Or what kind of game is it? And one separation is because always if you have something great, you feel, I have to reach the whole world with this now before someone else catches the market, and you feel and when you're deep into something, you see lots of indicators that other people think of it too because you're in that bubble, stuff like this. But then it's important to see, are we in a game where speed is very important, or maybe we are more in a learning game where product quality and serving the whole product and services around it and so on is more important. For instance, Airbnb, scale game, you really had to kind of take that marketplace before someone else did it. While Kolonial.no and Remarkable and Nyby and so on, far more learning games because it's complex games. And it's also that we sell before growth instead of the speed games, which is growth before sales. So then again, just is it actually so important to scale super fast? And is next market really important? Or can we build more references and so on in our own home market? But then also if you spend more time on building references in your home market, it's interesting to see, does those references from Norway have any value at all in Sweden or UK? And maybe the next country you go to should be a country that looks up to the countries where you have references. For instance, we find that Sweden, they like references from Norway, and same with UK. So then it has a value, those references.
Because it's a big balance as well, because it's very easy to become a hero in your own country. And we see this in music, we see it in film, in everything. But if you get too comfortable being a hero at home, it's going to be just harder to go out. Johanna?
No, I was also thinking when you were speaking now that, I mean, we talk more and more about ecosystems, right? But that is actually a fact in many cases that you're not on your own because you need to connect with so many other pieces of the puzzle to succeed. And an ecosystem might be very developed in one country, but not in another. So that's why I think like the Canute program and having a local market knowledge is so important because it's not, I guess, always just to implement your product, even if it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Because it has to be a piece of the puzzle for the users.
Especially in B2B, I think. Maybe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, but Mia.
I would really like to add another point to that, because I think a lot of companies and also advisors around them, they tend to only focus on external factors when you judge whether you're ready to scale internationally. Where what I see with the companies I work with is that there's a huge internal factor as well in the company to decide whether you're ready to grow. And this is, do you have your whole internal communication structure in place? Do you have the right team? Do you have the right, agreement in your board? Do you have the right agreement among you as founders? Because if you don't feel stable in that internal setup in a small market like one of the Nordic countries, 100% is going to break once, two of the founders are living in the US and UK, and your team is scattered around Europe, and the communication has to be across different time zones. And, it's just a whole other level of complexity when you're across several countries. So I think if you don't have that internal setup quite stable, when you start scaling, I think you're bound to die on the way.
So actually, then it does make sense to plan for being born global, even if you do the first local testing, because it's something about building the internal culture as well and preparing for this is where we want. Because if you then build a company where the entire team thinks that, oh, we're so great in Norway and suddenly we're scaling international, it's going to be a little bit tricky. But Mia, with so many companies going through your program, I'm sure you have a horror story or two, right? This is what you don't do.
Well,
tell us that.
I don't know if it's a horror story, but one of the issues I can share with you is that I both have private and public partners around me, and one of the numbers that they really like to look at is how many of the companies that have been through the program have actually succeeded in getting paying clients in the program afterwards. And that number is fairly high. It's like 70%. So I'm very happy with that number. But I think the stories that some people forget to look at or should look at is the fact that I actually have had quite a few companies coming on the New York program, for example. And then that's the 3 days that made them realize that they're not ready for the US yet. And they end up going back home and they realize we need more funding is normally what they realize, or they figure out that they need to get more data in order to raise capital from a US investor if they want to scale to the US. So they simply underestimated the job it was to scale to either the US or the UK. And then going through the Canute program has made them realize that, where I see that as a huge success as well. If I have spared them a lost year in scaling to the UK when they weren't ready yet, I think that's a really big, achievement as well.
Your horror stories are actually good stories.
Yeah, you can say so, right? Well, they could have turned into horror stories if they hadn't realized.
Exactly. So it's all about learning and knowing when you're ready. We've discussed the why, we've discussed the who, we've discussed the when. So now, so all we need is just the recipe. How do we do this? Fredrik.
Yeah, I can try with something. Because we talked about earlier about the structure versus the unstructured approach. And then if you go the unstructured approach, then you need to really get a lot of attention in the market. And a great example of that is Swipe, which I worked for some time. And we did a great launch with MasterCard, the world's first fingerprint authenticated payment card. We had 1,200 editorial articles all over the world, 30 countries, lots of attention in a very niche segment. And it was a great pull in the market after. What we learned also that the product wasn't industrialized yet, so we were a little bit early, but the market launch was fantastic with a big player and together with a startup, and it was a really good launch actually. And we made great presence in the market. How, for instance, we do with Nyby, which is then is a sales to growth company. We do more a structured approach where we evaluate the country. We see, is it reference effects from the existing markets that we're in? We find a local person. So in Sweden, it has been a Swede that knows the right words, that has this feel of the market and the government market there. We can talk to the different people, investigate, find the right stakeholders and so on. And then we create win-win partnerships locally there with Atea and with other key players so that we create an ecosystem for that country.
So Johanna, what's your how?
Yeah, coming from the outside in here, not being a startup, I would say definitely, take advantage of programs like Canute. Ask your, have experienced investors who's been on the journey before, and maybe a partner in the local market or a partner that can scale with you, for sure. Important.
Mia, do you agree or disagree with what's been said? Do all the right
I
things.
agree.
Get money.
100%
Go.
agree. 100% agree. I just, from from where the startups are sitting, it can just seem like such a huge task, like to be advised on. You need to find a knowledgeable investor. You need to find the right partners. Like, but how do I do that? If I've never been to the UK before and I want to scale to the UK, like where do I start? So I think like my 2 points would be quite hands-on. Like one is a market test before you scale, because it's massively expensive. Almost all other markets are bigger than the ones we come from, so we need to appreciate that it's a big cost as well in a small company. So that one advice is to test the market, the willingness to pay for your product before you actually hire someone locally. There's a lot of ways to do that. Also, hacking your way through that, set up like a website with a product that's not live yet or something like that. Just test the interest in the market before you invest in actually expanding to the market. That's one. And the other one is network. It's actually statistically proven that Nordic founders are some of the least globally connected in Europe. So when they interview Danish, Norwegian, and Swedish founders, they don't have a lot of international network that they use, in the day-to-day sparring and mentoring. And I think it's such a shame, because we just close in on ourselves. So it's just network, reach out to, track them down on LinkedIn or whatever you need to do. Come on Canute, speak to someone like Fredrik, who I'm sure has a very international network, and just get those connections in the market that you want to go to. And in network as well, just speak to other founders who have done it before yourself and see if they can save you some early mistakes.
Yeah, I think it would be great if we all could share all our mistakes, and then other people might be able to avoid. Although it's like with your children, right? You tell them, don't do this because it's a mistake. They'll still do it. But at least you can say, see, I told you so. So
That's actually very good advice. Listen to your own advice.
Yes. That is the best advice. Okay, so maybe we can round up with that. Like one final tip. Is networking your tip, or do you have another spare little golden nugget in your pocket?
No, I think that will be my main point. I'm speaking from a Danish cultural view here, but it seems like we're very reluctant to reach out to people we don't know in other countries, and we just have to get rid of that. Like if we were Americans, we would just scream the name of our startup out to the whole world. And I think that Nordic founders could learn a bit from that, and just reach out to people. Like normally they're happy to help if you go around it in a polite way. So reach out to people in network.
Fredrik, your final tip. What's the one main thing for us who wants to scale?
Build something really great first, and then that's a great product and a great team to execute it.
Johanna, you have the last word.
Yeah, of course, I have to say, find a bank that can scale with you.
Boom, there you go. Thank you guys so much. This has been an amazing conversation, and I hope everybody listening has learned a thing or two about how to scale international. And if not, reach out to people. And there's 3 very capable people here. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you.